The relentless Oregon rain hammered against the corrugated tin roof of the Rusty Nail, creating a deafening rhythm that had become the soundtrack of Sarah's life. Outside, the town of Oak Creek was drowning in mud and gray mist, a place where the timber industry had died a slow death, leaving behind only rusting machinery and bitter men. Inside the bar, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool, stale lager, and the lingering smoke of cigarettes smoked illicitly near the back door. Sarah wiped down the scarred mahogany bar top for what felt like the 1,000th time that night, her movements heavy with exhaustion. She checked the clock on the wall, a neon beer sign that flickered with a dying buzz, reading just past 10 o'clock. Her shift was far from over, and the ache in her lower back was radiating down to her legs, a constant reminder of the double shifts she pulled to keep the lights on. Being a single mother to a 6-year-old girl in a dying town meant swallowing her pride daily, serving drinks to men who had given up on their own dreams years ago. Every tip jar dollar was calculated instantly in her head: milk, bread, rent, electricity. The bar was moderately full for a Friday, populated mostly by regulars who nursed their drinks in silence, staring into the amber depths of their glasses as if searching for answers. The jukebox in the corner played a mournful country ballad, the steel guitar whining in harmony with the wind howling outside. It was a peaceful misery, the kind of atmosphere Sarah was used to managing, until the heavy oak door swung open with a violent thud. A gust of cold, wet wind blew in, followed by a group of 4 loud, boisterous men. Leading the pack was Travis Henderson, the 30-year-old son of the town's biggest car dealership owner. Travis wore his father's money like armor, striding into the dive bar with an arrogance that instantly sucked the air out of the room. He was already drunk, his face flushed and his eyes swimming with that dangerous mix of liquor and entitlement that Sarah had learned to fear. The regulars shifted in their stools, hunching their shoulders, instinctively trying to become invisible to avoid his attention. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach as Travis slapped a $100 bill onto the bar, demanding a round of shots for his sycophantic friends. She forced a polite smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, and reached for the bottle of whiskey, praying he would take his drinks to a table and leave her alone. Travis watched her hands, his gaze lingering uncomfortably long, making a show of inspecting her like she was one of the used cars on his father's lot. He made a crude comment about her appearance, causing his friends to erupt in sharp, braying laughter. In the far corner of the room, tucked away in the deepest shadows of a booth, sat a figure that seemed carved from granite. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and bearded, wearing a leather vestacut that bore the winged skull of the Hells Angels. He had been there for hours, nursing a single drink, his presence radiating a quiet intensity that kept everyone else at a respectful distance. He wasn't part of the local scene. The California rocker on his back marked him as a traveler, a nomad passing through the rain-soaked north. The biker hadn't spoken a word to anyone, not even to Sarah, when he ordered, communicating only with nods and grunts. His eyes, hidden partially by the brim of a soaked baseball cap, were fixed on the front window, watching the storm. Sarah found his silence unsettling, yet compared to Travis's chaotic noise, the biker felt like a stabilizing anchor in the room. She poured the shots for Travis, her hand shaking slightly, wishing she could disappear into the back office until closing time. Travis downed his shot in one gulp and slammed the glass down, shattering the fragile piece of the bar. He demanded another round immediately, his voice rising in volume and aggression, slurring his words as he leaned over the counter. Sarah hesitated, knowing that serving him more was a risk, but cutting him off was dangerous. Mike, the owner, was terrified of Travis's father and would likely fire her if she caused a scene. She poured the second round, her eyes darting to the door, hoping for a distraction that wouldn't come. "You look tired, Sarah," Travis sneered, his breath hot and smelling of sour mash. "Maybe you need someone to take care of you. Someone with real money." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her neck. Sarah recoiled instantly, pulling back as if she had been burned, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Please, Travis, I'm just trying to work," she said, her voice trembling but firm enough to be heard over the music. She moved to the other end of the bar, busying herself with washing glasses, trying to put physical distance between them. Travis's face darkened, his ego bruised by the public rejection, however polite it had been. The laughter of his friends died down as they sensed the shift in his mood, a predator deciding to drop the playful act. "Don't walk away from me when I'm talking to you," Travis barked, moving around the side of the bar, invading the employee-only space. The regulars looked up, alarmed, but nobody moved. Nobody wanted to cross the Hendersons in a town where they owned half the debt. Sarah backed up until she hit the rear counter, trapped between the sink and the angry man. "Get out from behind the bar, Travis," she warned, panic rising in her throat like bile. "I'm serious. I'll call the sheriff." It was a hollow threat. The sheriff was a drinking buddy of Travis's father. Travis laughed, a cruel, ugly sound, and lunged forward. He grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging into her bicep with bruising force, jerking her towards him. Sarah gasped in pain, the tray of glasses she was holding crashing to the floor, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. The sound of breaking glass cut through the music, silencing the bar instantly. "You think you're too good for me?" Travis hissed, his face inches from hers, spitting as he spoke. "You're nothing, just a waitress in a dump." He shook her, enjoying the fear in her eyes, enjoying the power he held over someone smaller and weaker. Sarah tried to pry his fingers off, but he was strong, fueled by adrenaline and rage. Tears sprang to her eyes, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation of being manhandled in front of the entire town. She looked around the room, silently begging for help, locking eyes with the regulars she had served for years. They looked down at their boots, studying the sawdust on the floor, ashamed of their cowardice but paralyzed by it. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by Sarah's ragged breathing and the rain drumming on the roof. Travis grinned, tightening his grip, preparing to drag her out of the bar or worse. He felt invincible, the king of his small, miserable kingdom. Then, from the dark corner booth, came the sound of heavy boots scraping against the wooden floorboards. It was a slow, deliberate sound, like the ticking of a doomsday clock. The Hells Angels stood up. The biker moved with a deceptive speed for a man of his size, covering the distance across the bar floor in long, heavy strides. He didn't run. He stalked, his movements fluid and precise, devoid of any wasted energy or hesitation. His face was a mask of stone, completely devoid of anger or excitement, which made him infinitely more terrifying than if he were shouting. The patrons who were watching felt a primal chill run down their spines, recognizing a violence that was professional, not emotional. Travis, still gripping Sarah's bruised arm, didn't notice the approaching threat until a massive shadow fell over him, blocking out the neon lights. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption, his eyes widening as he registered the size of the man standing before him. The biker's leather vest creaked as he stopped, the death head patch staring down at Travis like a grim reaper. "Let go," the biker said. His voice was like gravel grinding together inside a cement mixer, deep, low, and vibrating with an absolute, non-negotiable threat. It wasn't a request. It was a command issued by someone who was used to being obeyed instantly. Travis blinked, his alcohol-addled brain struggling to process the situation, his ego warring with his survival instinct. "This ain't your business, old man," Travis slurred, trying to summon false bravado. "Go sit back down before you break a hip." He tightened his grip on Sarah. A foolish attempt to show dominance, but Sarah could feel his hand shaking against her skin. Sarah watched the biker's eyes shift from Travis's sweaty face down to his hand on her arm. The shift was subtle, a microscopic narrowing of the eyelids, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The biker didn't blink. He didn't posture, he simply acted. Without another word, the biker reached out with a hand that looked like a leather catcher's mitt. He didn't throw a punch. He simply grabbed Travis's wrist, the one holding Sarah, and squeezed. It was a vice grip, the kind developed from decades of clutching vibrating handlebars and wrenching rusted steel. Travis howled, a high-pitched sound of shock and agony, his knees buckling as the pressure hit a nerve cluster. His hand sprang open involuntarily, releasing Sarah as if she were red-hot iron. She stumbled back, clutching her bruised arm, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, putting distance between herself and the violence. The biker didn't let go of Travis. With a fluid motion, he twisted the younger man's arm behind his back, leveraging the joint to its breaking point. He slammed Travis face first onto the sticky surface of the bar counter, sending beer glasses flying. The sound of the impact was sickeningly loud in the silent bar, a dull thud of bone meeting hardwood. "You touch a woman like that again," the biker whispered into Travis's ear, his voice calm and deadly, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "And you won't have hands to touch anything. Do you understand me?" He leaned his weight onto Travis, pinning him helplessly. Travis's friends, who had stood up aggressively a moment before, froze in their tracks. They looked at the patches on the vest, looked at the sheer size of the man, and looked at the efficient brutality he displayed. They decided, in that split second, that their loyalty to Travis did not extend to fighting a Hell's Angel. They sat back down, averting their eyes. The biker hauled Travis up by the back of his expensive designer collar, choking him slightly. He marched him towards the front door, Travis stumbling and scrabbling for footing, completely emasculated. The biker kicked the heavy oak door open, letting the storm rage into the room. With one effortless shove, he threw the drunk man out into the pouring rain and mud of the parking lot. Travis landed hard on his hands and knees, splashing into a puddle, gasping for air. He scrambled away on all fours, slipping in the muck, humiliated and terrified, looking back only once to see the silhouette in the doorway. The biker stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him go, the neon light of the open sign buzzing above him. The wind whipped his graying beard, but he didn't seem to notice the cold. He was ensuring the threat was gone, his posture alert, scanning the darkness for any sign of retaliation. Then he turned around and walked back inside, closing the door against the storm. The silence in the bar was absolute. Nobody dared to speak, nobody dared to reach for their drink. He was the center of gravity in the room. He walked over to where Sarah was standing, trembling near the broken glass. She flinched as he approached, expecting violence, conditioned by a lifetime of bad men to fear anyone who could inflict such damage so easily. She pressed her back against the shelves, her eyes wide. He stopped 3 feet away, respecting her space, reading her fear correctly. He reached into his pocket, and for a terrifying second, she thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a thick roll of cash, held together by a rubber band. He peeled off 5 $100 bills, his movements slow and deliberate. He placed them gently on the bar counter, right next to the spilled whiskey. The contrast between his scarred, tattered hands and the delicate gesture was stark. "For the damage," he said, nodding toward the shattered glass on the floor. "And for the trouble." He looked her in the eye, and for the first time, she saw something behind the stoic masked tiredness, perhaps, or a deep, ancient sadness. It's too much," Sarah stammered, her voice shaking so hard she could barely form words. "You don't have to, double quotes. Take it," he said softly, cutting her off. "Go home to your kid. Shift's over." He turned, walked back to his booth, finished his whiskey in one gulp, and walked out into the rain. A moment later, the roar of a Harley-Davidson engine shattered the night, fading into the distance like rolling thunder. The next morning, the rain had turned to a persistent, chilly drizzle, wrapping Oak Creek in a suffocating gray shroud. Sarah sat at her small, chipped kitchen table, staring blankly at the $500 sitting next to her coffee mug. The money felt heavy, charged with a strange energy, enough to pay the rent and fill the fridge for weeks, yet it terrified her. She had barely slept, every creak of her old house sounding like footsteps, her mind replaying the violence of the night before. She touched the bruise on her arm, a dark purple mark in the shape of Travis's thumb, a physical reminder of how vulnerable she truly was. The biker's face haunted her thoughts, not the violence, but the strange, sad kindness in his eyes before he left. By the time she dropped Lily off at elementary school, she realized that, in a town this small, secrets simply didn't exist. 3 different mothers stopped her at the school gate, their eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and judgment. They asked about the gang war at the Rusty Nail, their whispers loud enough for the children to hear. The story was already morphing into mythology, twisting with every retelling. Some said the biker had broken Travis's arm in 3 places. Others claimed he held a knife to his throat and threatened to burn the bar down. The truth, that he had simply been stronger, calmer, and scarier, was getting lost, but the fear was real. Sarah went to the local diner for a coffee before her shift, needing to feel the presence of normal people. The mood in the town was tense. People were looking over their shoulders. Travis was a local boy, a golden son despite his behavior, and an outsider attacking him was seen by some as an attack on the town itself. She arrived at the bar early to clean up the rest of the glass. Mike, the owner, was already there, pacing back and forth, looking pale and sweaty. He didn't thank her for cleaning. He looked at her with a new kind of fear, as if she were a lightning rod attracting storms he couldn't weather. "He came back, you know," Mike said abruptly, wiping a glass with a dirty rag, his eyes darting to the window. Sarah froze, her broom hovering over the floor. "Who? Travis?" Her heart skipped a beat, dread pooling in her stomach. "No, the biker," Mike whispered, "about an hour ago. He didn't come in. Just sat on his bike across the street idling the engine. He watched the place for 10 minutes. Then he rode off toward the motel." A chill ran down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with the drafty room. Was he stalking her? Or was he watching out for her? The line between protector and threat felt blurry, and she didn't know if she should feel safe or hunted. Later that shift, the door opened, and the air in the room grew heavy and stiff. It wasn't the biker. It was Travis's father, Mr. Henderson, a man who wore expensive suits that looked out of place in Oak Creek, accompanied by the local sheriff. They walked straight to the bar, bypassing the tables. "Sarah," the sheriff said, tipping his hat awkwardly. He was a good man at heart, but he had a mortgage and kids, and he knew exactly who signed the town's checks. "Mr. Henderson wants to file a formal complaint about the assault on his son last night," the sheriff said, his voice flat. "He says you instigated it by inviting a criminal element into the establishment and inciting violence. That's a lie," Sarah cried out, indignation temporarily overriding her fear. "Travis grabbed me. He was hurting me. The man just stopped him. He didn't even throw a punch. My son has a fractured wrist and severe bruising." Mr. Henderson spat, his face red with suppressed rage. "And that animal you keep company with is going to pay. And if you cover for him, young lady, you're an accessory." "I don't even know his name," Sarah pleaded, looking at Mike for support. But Mike was busy studying the floor tiles, refusing to make eye contact, shrinking into the background. "We're looking for him," the sheriff sighed, looking tired. "If he comes back, you call us immediately. Do not engage with him. Do you understand, Sarah?" She nodded, biting her lip to keep from crying in front of them. As they left, she felt more isolated than ever. The law wasn't on her side. Money was. And she had none, except the cash the stranger had left her. That night, as she locked the back door of the bar, terrified of the walk to her car, she heard it again. The low, rhythmic potato idle of a Vitwin engine. She froze, clutching her keys as a weapon. She looked out into the dark, rain-slicked alley. The single headlight cut through the mist like a lighthouse beam. The biker was there, straddling his machine, the rain beading on his black helmet. He wasn't revving the engine. He was just waiting. He watched her get into her car, waited until her engine started, and then simply nodded once before peeling away into the night. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare, testing Sarah's sanity. Travis didn't come back to the bar physically, but his toxic presence was everywhere, seeping into the cracks of her life. It started small. She would come out to her old sedan after a shift to find spit on the windshield or the wipers bent back. The morning she woke up to find her mailbox smashed to pieces, lying in the mud of her driveway. There was no note, no witness, just the violent destruction of her property. It was a message: "We can get to you where you live." The town was divided in a way that made Sarah feel exposed. The women whispered support to her in the grocery store aisles, squeezing her hand briefly, tired of men like Travis ruling the roost. The men, however, were wary, eyeing her with suspicion. The presence of a 1%er, an outlawed biker, in their quiet town made them nervous, and they blamed Sarah for bringing that element into Oak Creek. Sarah was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline. She wasn't sleeping more than 2 hours a night. Every sound, a branch hitting the window, a car backfiring, made her jump out of her skin. She kept Lily close, refusing to let her play outside, which made the child restless and confused. On Thursday night, the rain was coming down in sheets when the door to the Rusty Nail opened. The biker she had heard whispered rumors that his name was Jax actually came inside. He didn't sit in the dark corner this time. He walked straight to the bar and sat on a stool right near the register. He looked wet and tired, water dripping from his beard onto his leather vest. He ordered a coffee. Black. No whiskey, no beer, just hot, black coffee. "The sheriff is looking for you," Sarah whispered as she poured the coffee, her hand trembling so much the liquid sloshed over the rim. "Travis's dad is pressing charges. They have your description." Jocks took a sip, completely unbothered by the heat or the news. "Let him press," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "Sheriff knows better than to start a war over a bruised ego. He's just making noise to keep the rich man happy." "Why are you doing this?" Sarah asked, the question bursting out of her before she could stop it. "Why are you watching me? Why did you give me money? You don't know me." Jocks looked at her, and for a moment the hard shell cracked. He traced the rim of the cup with a scarred thumb, looking at the steam rising. "I had a daughter," he said simply. "About your age. She worked in a place like this, down in California." He paused, and the silence was heavy with things unsaid. "She didn't have anyone to watch the door for her," he continued, his voice dropping an octave. "Bad things happened. I wasn't there when I should have been." He didn't finish the story. He didn't have to. The pain in his eyes was a physical thing, a deep, festering wound that time hadn't healed. He wasn't saving Sarah. He was trying to save a ghost, trying to rewrite a past that was already set in stone. "Travis isn't done," Sarah said, lowering her voice, tears prickling her eyes. "He's been doing things, messing with my car, scaring my kid. He drove by my house slowly yesterday, revving his truck engine. Lily was terrified. Jox's hand stopped moving on the cup. He set it down slowly, with controlled precision. The stillness that came over him was sudden and absolute, far more terrifying than any shout. He went near your kid, yes. He knows where we live." Jox nodded once, slowly. He threw a $20 bill on the bar. "Go home, Sarah. Lock your doors tonight. Put on a movie for the girl. Don't look out the windows." "What are you going to do?" she asked, panic rising in her chest. She didn't want blood on her hands. "Nothing you need to know about," Jack said. He stood up, and for the first time, Sarah saw the patches on the side of his vest, clearly. One of them said "filthy few." She didn't know what it meant, but the small skull on it seemed to grin at her. He turned and walked out into the storm. Sarah watched him go, feeling a strange mix of relief and terror. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her living room with the lights off, clutching her phone, listening to the rain. But the street outside remained quiet. Too quiet. The consequences of the tension hit Sarah hard on Friday morning, swift and brutal. The phone rang at 8 a.m. It was Mike. "Don't come in, Sarah," he said, his voice heavy with guilt, but firm. "I can't do this anymore." "Mike, please," Sarah begged, gripping the phone. "I need this job. I didn't do anything wrong." "Henderson came by," Mike interrupted. "He's threatening to pull his advertising from the local paper and tell the bank to call him my business loan. He says you're bad for business. Says you attract trouble." "I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am." The line went dead. Sarah dropped the phone, staring at the wall. She was fired. In a town with 3 bars and 2 diners, getting fired for trouble with the Hendersons was a death sentence for her employment prospects. She was blacklisted. She sat on the floor and cried, the sobs racking her body. The $500 Jax gave her was gone, spent on bills, food, and fixing the mailbox. Now she had nothing. No job, a damaged car, an enemy with money, and a child to feed. She looked at Lily, who was watching cartoons in the next room, oblivious to the fact that their world was crumbling. Sarah realized she had to leave. She would have to pack up the car and drive to her sister's in Idaho. It was defeat. It was running away. But she had no fight left in her. She spent the miserable, rainy afternoon packing boxes. Every item she taped up felt like a failure. The house she had tried so hard to make a warm home was being dismantled, stripped back to bare walls and bad memories. Around dusk, a loud, authoritative knocking shook the front door. Sarah jumped, grabbing a heavy metal flashlight she kept for emergencies. She crept to the peephole, her heart pounding. It wasn't Travis, it was the sheriff. He looked alone. She opened the door a crack, keeping the chain on. "Am I under arrest?" she asked bitterly. "Did Mr. Henderson find something else to blame me for?" "No, Sarah," the sheriff said. He looked pale, shaken, like a man who had seen something he couldn't explain. "I just came to tell you. You don't have to worry about the Hendersons for a while." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, frowning. "Travis left town this morning. the sheriff said, glancing at the dark woods across the street. Packed a bag in a hurry. His dad says he's going to stay with an aunt in Nevada. Indefinitely. Sarah opened the door wider, confused. Why? He was winning. He got me fired. Why would he leave? The sheriff looked at the ground, kicking a pebble. Someone paid him a visit last night. We got a call about a disturbance at his trailer out on the logging road. By the time we got there, the place was rearranged. Rearranged. The front door was off the hinges. His truck was disabled. The engine block was cracked. And Travis was sitting on his porch, crying, waiting for us. He didn't want to press charges. He refused to say who did it. He just wanted to leave. The sheriff looked Sarah in the eye, his expression serious. Whatever guardian angel you got, tell him to move on. My town can't handle this kind of justice. Sarah felt a shockwave go through her. Jacques. He had done what the law couldn't. He had put the fear of God into a man who thought he was untouchable. He hadn't killed him. He had dismantled his ego and his sense of safety. But there was a cost. The sheriff walked back to his cruiser, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway. She wasn't relieved. She was awestruck and terrified. She realized she was indebted to a dangerous man who operated in the shadows. Sarah drove to the motel on the edge of town, the Pine View, a dilapidated strip of rooms where she had seen the black motorcycle parked earlier that week. It was a risky move going to him, but she couldn't leave things like this. She needed to know why. She needed to say thank you and goodbye. The neon sign flickered in the twilight, buzzing angrily. Jacques was there, sitting on a rusted bench outside room 12, smoking a cigarette. He was cleaning his fingernails with a knife, looking calm and composed. He watched her pull in, his face impassive. She got out of the car, hugging her coat tight against the wind. The air smelled of wet pine and exhaust. "The sheriff told me," she said, standing a few feet away, afraid to get too close. Jacques exhaled a plume of blue smoke into the damp air. "Sheriff talks too much," he grunted, not looking up from his knife. "He said Travis left town." "That he was terrified," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "You could have gone to jail. For me. For us. Why take that risk?" "Men like that," Jack said, looking up finally, "they don't learn from fines or warnings. They only understand one language, pain and fear. He won't bother you again. He knows the price now." "I lost my job," Sarah admitted, the reality crashing back down on her. "Mike fired me because of the drama. Even with Travis gone, the Hendersons won't let me work here." Jacques frowned. His brow furrowed deep, creating valleys in his weathered forehead. "Mike is a coward. You're better off not working for a man without a spine." "I'm moving to Idaho," she said, tears welling up. "I can't stay here. I have to start over. But I wanted to thank you. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You fought for me." Jacques stood up. He wiped a knife on his jeans and folded it away. He looked at her old sedan, packed with boxes, then looked at Sarah. He reached into his vest pocket again. This time, he didn't pull out money. He pulled out a grease-stained business card. It was for a mechanic shop in a town called Redmond, about 30 miles away. Miller's Auto Repair. "My brother runs this shop," Jack said, handing her the card. "He needs a manager for the front desk. Someone who can organize paperwork, handle customers, and isn't afraid of grease. It pays better than pouring beer." Sarah stared at the card, stunned. "Why?" "Because you stood your ground," Jack said, his voice gruff. "You didn't cower until he put his hands on you. You got grit, Sarah. The world needs more of that. Kelim Jacques sent you." He wasn't offering her a handout. He was offering her a lifeline. A way to stay in Oregon, but start over with dignity. A job where she wouldn't be displayed like meat. "I leave tomorrow," Jacques said, answering the question she hadn't asked yet. My club is moving north. Just passed through to visit some old ghosts. Done what I needed to do. Will I see you again? Sarah asked, realizing she would miss this terrifying silent guardian. Better for you if you don't, Jacques said. He dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. Live your life, Sarah. Raise that girl to be strong. Don't let the bastards win. He turned and went into his room, closing the door firmly. The click of the lock was final. The conversation was over. The transaction was complete. 6 months later, the rain in Oregon hadn't stopped, but Sarah didn't mind it as much anymore. She sat behind the clean, organized desk of Miller's Auto Repair, the smell of oil and coffee replacing the smell of stale beer and regret. The pay was good. The hours were steady, 9 to 5. She was home every night to cook dinner for Lily, who was thriving in a new school. The dark circles under Sarah's eyes had faded, replaced by a look of quiet confidence. She had bought a newer car, a reliable SUV that started every time she turned the key. Travis Henderson never came back to Oak Creek. Rumors filtered back that he was working at a car wash in Las Vegas, keeping his head down, a shadow of the arrogant bully he used to be. His father had quietly sold the dealership and retired, the family's influence shattered by the shame of their son's abrupt and cowardly departure. The story of that night at the Rusty Nail had become local folklore, a legend that grew with every telling. In the bars and barbershops, men told the story of the ghost rider who threw a man through a door and paid a single mum's rent with a stack of hundreds. Some said he was 7 feet tall. Some said he was an enforcer sent by the angels to clean up the town. Sarah never corrected them. She never told them about the tired man with the sad eyes who just wanted a cup of coffee and redemption for a daughter he couldn't save. She kept that truth for herself, a precious secret tucked away in her heart. Sometimes when the wind blew from the highway, bringing the scent of pine and ozone, she would pause in her work. She would listen for the deep, distinctive rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine echoing off the canyon walls. She never saw Jacques again. He was a nomad, a creature of the road, existing in the spaces between towns, forever moving. But every month on the 1st, she would look at the freedom she now had, the safety, the dignity, and she would whisper a quiet thank you to the empty road. That Friday night, she closed the shop early. The rain had paused, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of wet earth. As she locked the door, a group of bikers roared past on the highway, their engines shaking the ground, their silhouettes cutting against the setting sun. It wasn't him, she knew. He was long gone. But the sound was no longer scary to her. It didn't mean danger anymore. It was the sound of angels, just not the kind with wings and halos. The kind with leather vests, scarred knuckles, and a code of honor that the law couldn't understand. Sarah smiled, took Lily's hand, and walked to her car, her head held high. The legend would stay in Oak Creek, whispered over beers for years to come, but the life he saved was moving forward, and that was the only legacy that truly mattered.